Take a close look at this girl's face. This is the face of a killer who killed her own father, and not just him. After all, this is also the face of the youngest girl in the history of Great Britain to be convicted of double murder. I hope you're sitting comfortably, because this is definitely scary. In the summer of 2009 in Ipswich, 15-year-old Lorraine Thorp stands in the defendant's dock. The jury, the judge, the prosecutors, and basically everyone in town was shocked at how their city produced one of the youngest killers in Britain. Or perhaps it's even better to ask why. You see, in the house where Lorraine Thorp grew up, there was nothing but chaos. And that's no exaggeration. Imagine 11 brothers and sisters under one roof. And the parents? Well, they weren't exactly interested in raising them. They were much more interested in getting drunk. I guess it goes without saying that there wasn't any special attention given to raising any individual child. There's no open source information suggesting the parents were physically abusive or aggressive towards the children. They just didn't care. If God gives you a child, He'll provide for it. Either way, when the heroine of this episode, Lorraine, was 12, her parents got divorced. Again, I can't say for sure what happened to all the children, but it's known for certain that Lorraine stayed with her father. Her father's alcoholism marked the beginning of a downward spiral in her life, at an incredible speed rivaled only by how quickly angry comments appear on Threads or Twitter. Life with her father was far from rosy. They were constantly moving and struggling, going from one place to another. Most of these weren't the kind of homes anyone would want to live in, especially not a little girl. But at least those were some kind of homes, because at times, father and daughter lived out in the open, in tents, in the so-called best neighborhoods of the city. If you're wondering whether this way of life attracted any attention to the girl, I mean from social services, then of course it did. However, obviously not enough. Well, the girl was taken away several times, but she kept coming back again and again to the life she already knew. Father, alcohol, darkness. But it gets even more surreal, because according to court documents, later Lorraine, that is the child, became sort of a caretaker, if you will, a guardian for her disabled father, which happened because of his constant alcoholism. This arrangement would later be deemed unacceptable by Lorraine's attorney in court, similar to the deep concern felt when rockets from Russia fly toward Ukraine.
In Europe, there is concern about the unstable political situation in Ukraine.
Unacceptable. Moreover, Lorraine was diagnosed with the same disorder that girls on TikTok keep self-diagnosing one after another. But in Lorraine's case, it was actually done by doctors. Basically, never self-diagnose. Friends, I understand that for true crime fans like you, as an old-timer myself, let's say, all this might not sound too shocking. But damn, it is shocking. Just imagine it, paint the picture in your mind. You're about 14 years old, and after school you don't go home in the usual sense of the word, but to a tent where your drunk father is waiting for you, and instead of a tasty lunch there's only a bottle of vodka. And you drink it. The girl basically didn't communicate with friends her age, she didn't even really go to school. Her school, like in the best rap songs, was the street, but in her case, it's not some kind of creative exaggeration, it's just a fact. Her teachers and friends were mostly older, and much heavier drinkers. And besides, these weren't just harmless drunks, they were criminals, basically, just the lowest kind. They mostly got money for vodka through petty theft. They didn't, let's say, beg for charity. The thefts, in turn, often went hand in hand with physical violence. As for who was supposed to be, so to speak, the sponsor of this evening, by the way, later during the court hearings, Lorraine's defense would insist that it was precisely this environment that caused her, so to speak, to not understand at all what was good and what was bad. She had no guidelines, and for her, all of this was just a game. As I already mentioned, the girl's environment mostly consisted of older people. One of them was 41-year-old Paul. This guy, besides being quite a heavy drinker, also had certain leadership qualities, enough to conditionally dominate among the other drunks. Lorraine was absolutely thrilled with this Paul, really strongly. Rumor has it that they were kind of hooking up. I hope not. Basically, they both deny it, but people say all sorts of things.
Both individuals denied having any sexual relationship during the investigation, which was a concern for many people.
Nevertheless, this Mr. Paul had his own apartment, and later Lorraine started living there with him. And not alone, but together with her father as well. As you can imagine, the atmosphere in that apartment was quite unique. I suppose the walls of that apartment rarely saw any of its residents sober. At this time, literally the last bit of sense in Lorraine's head left her body, probably forever, or at least for a very long time. But how else could it be? Just imagine. A lot of alcohol from a very young age, with very questionable company, the infamous Arduk, and mental health medication. Lorento would take them, washing them down with vodka, then sometimes not take them at all. Completely unclear relationship with her father, and even more confusing with a 41-year-old man. The girl was literally becoming more uncontrollable and aggressive with each passing day. This was unlikely to end well. Sadly, 41-year-old Rosalind Hunt, known as Rozi, who lived alone, met an unfortunate end. The woman had divorced her husband and since then had taken up self-medicating. She called it a shot for every illness. The local drinking crowd knew this woman very well, and since Lorraine was part of it, meeting her was inevitable. Later, Rosie's brother would say that in his opinion the woman was being taken advantage of, let's say socially. You see, Rozi got government housing, in the very area where all the local drunks used to gather. One day, Rosie's brother came to visit her at her apartment and saw at least 10 people there who were not exactly sober. He went up to his sister and asked if she needed help, maybe if they should be kicked out or something like that. But Rozi said, "No, everything's fine, these are my friends, go away." The woman's brother assumes that Rozi just liked feeling needed, as sad as that may sound. Rozi thought they were her friends, real friends, but in reality all they needed from her was a place to stay when it was cold and maybe have a little drink. Paul Clark, the one who started living with Lorraine and her father, had a dog named, but who knows what its name was anyway, he had a dog. One day Rozi took him and went for a walk with him, and something strange happened there. The dog either tried to bite a kid or was just barking loudly, I'm unsure which. But the point is that Rozi pulled him really hard and even hit him on the head, apparently. Paul went crazy after hearing the information. He openly threatened Rozi, claiming she would face consequences if he encountered her. He didn't say anything terrible, but he just said that he wouldn't let a woman get away with it so easily. Lorena's father, whose name is Mr. Desmond Thorp by the way, had finally gotten his own apartment at that time. Rozi, the same woman who supposedly hit the dog, went to him, to Desmond, because she wanted to stay there for a while until Paul calmed down and everything else. Desmond and Rozi were sitting and talking, and at some point Desmond's daughter Lorraine came to the apartment. She came up to Rozi and said, "You know what, you're overthinking things. Paul won't do anything bad to you at all. Yes, he's upset, but who wouldn't be upset if their dog was hit? I would be very upset. But let's all meet together, talk it out, and everything will be forgotten. Just apologize and that's it." Rozi thought it might be a good idea, since she couldn't keep hiding out at other people's houses all the time. Nothing seemed to be wrong, but of course trouble happened anyway. Once she was in Paul's apartment, Rozi couldn't leave anymore, at least not on her own. The thing is, the woman was subjected to brutal, very brutal torture. And it came from both Paul and Lorena. She didn't stand aside. I won't and honestly don't want to describe everything that was done to the woman, but, for example, the sweet couple took a cheese grater and used it. But instead of cheese, it was Rosi's skin. They rubbed salt into the wounds they made so the woman would suffer even more. This continued for 2 full weeks, not just a few minutes, hours or days. After that, Rozi was moved, let's say, to her own apartment. The torture continued. And one day, Rosi's neighbor heard some strange but wild screams coming from Rosi's apartment. The woman called the cops and they came to the address. They knocked on the door, didn't hear anything, turned around and went home. I don't know, maybe the cops thought it wasn't as bad as the neighbor said on the phone, or maybe things just worked themselves out somehow. But the truth is, at that time, Rozi, Lorraine, and Paul were all in the apartment, sitting very quietly. After the police left, Lorraine and Paul decided to go shopping, went to the pharmacy for Rosi's sleeping pills, but not ibuprofen or similar medicines. The plan was to drug Rozi and make it look like she died of natural causes. Well, the plan, as they say, was a trap, but for some reason, they didn't take into account that Rosi's whole body was already covered with numerous wounds. And presenting it as some kind of accident or her own decision to end her life, objectively, seems like a bad idea. But since both Paulette and Lorraine's brains were already wasted, they likely didn't see any issue with it. Either way, the attempts to drug Rozi failed, and in the end, they just decided to kill her. But of course I say just kill her. The truth is, beating her to death was not a quick death. And it happened on August 9th.
Multiple injuries were found on her chest and abdomen. It was found that 9 separate ribs were broken, and there are indications that she was alive at the time these injuries were sustained.
And once again, if anyone thinks that gender was the main factor behind all this, that the algorithm was a victim of manipulation and so on, don't jump to conclusions, dear ones.
From my experience, I haven't seen this level of violence, these types of injuries inflicted by a 15-year-old girl. Usually, in such cases, they might participate in some violence, maybe on the edge, in a certain way. But being actively involved in such torturous activity is extremely rare. So,
some time passed, and Rosie's neighbor, the same one who first called the cops, called them again. This time she said, you know what, there are just a bunch of flies around Rosie's apartment. Besides, no one has seen her for quite a while. Neither alive nor dead, it's worth checking. Eventually, law enforcement officers did get into Rosie's apartment, where they found the woman dead. The cause of death was a blow to the head with a blunt object. Again, whether because of her young age or alcohol, but Lorraine basically didn't keep quiet and didn't hide what she had done. There are plenty of testimonies from the same drinking crowd that the girl was simply bragging about what she had done. She was telling everyone about it left and right, and when she did it, she didn't look worried at all, like something serious had actually happened. She grinned as if to say, you know what we did to Rozi? Because all of this was happening within the same Alcom community, let's say, the information eventually reached Lorraine's father, Mr. Desmond, of course, and he did not share the girl's enthusiasm. On the contrary, he was even shocked, and he considered reporting Lorraine and Paul to the police. But instead of just going ahead and doing it, he started discussing it with other members of the Alcom community. And this information already reached Lorraine and Paul, who soon knocked on Desmond's door. The conversation was relaxed as they attempted to clarify that it was all a misunderstanding and slander, asserting their innocence in the matter. Desmond calmed down somewhat and eventually fell asleep. The meeting, I remind you, was held in his apartment. When he fell asleep, Lorraine and Paul took a pillow, approached their father, and suffocated him. And when he was already dead, Lorraine, by the way, also kicked him in the head. The very next day after the police found the bodies, they were called to Desmond's apartment, where he was found dead. Interestingly, the police assumed that in Desmond's case, it could be, let's say, natural causes of death. After all, let me remind you that the man's lifestyle was far from exemplary, and the amount of alcohol in his blood was sky high. But questions arose quickly because first of all, there was a mark from a blow on his head, and secondly, soon a pillow was found in the bushes near the house, the very one that had bloodstains on it, and it belonged to Desmond. This already suggested that the cause of Mr. Desmond's death could be anything but natural. They began questioning the locals about what they saw and heard, asking them to share all the details. And the locals did see something. Specifically, they saw Lorraine and Paul leaving Desmond's place around the time of his death. So by that time, there were already suspects who had been detained. But surprise, they just denied everything. Although it's very interesting that Lorraine admitted the footprint on her father's head was hers, or rather from her shoe. But at the same time, she said she didn't know how it happened and that she wasn't involved. But the further the investigation went, the more details pointed to Lorraine and Paul being behind the murders of Rozi and Desmond. Investigators assumed the girl was just a puppet in the skilled hands of Paul, a sort of evil manipulative genius. But during the trial, it turned out that this was at least not entirely true, if not the opposite. The trial itself, by the way, was not easy. The thing is, most of the testimonies were given by people who were alcoholics or drug addicts. This certainly did not make the prosecution's job any easier, but what about the defense? Well, I mean, it was pretty easy to dismiss about half of those testimonies as simply unreliable. But there's a nuance, and that's Lorraine's behavior during the trial. The girl from the squad simply couldn't, or maybe even didn't want to, hide her reactions. And her reaction was sarcastically, jokingly happy. She didn't feel even the slightest bit sorry about what happened, neither to her father nor to Rozi.
She bragged about it. She laughed about it. She laughed at the level of violence they used against Roslinghan. She shows no empathy, no remorse, and she's only 15.
The first time I went to court, all I remember is how Lorraine Thorp was laughing and giggling with Paul Clark, as if it was a big, big joke.
Eventually, Lorraine and Paul became not just suspects but defendants in a double murder. Moreover, during the trial, it turned out that at the end of June 2009, Lorraine was placed under the supervision of social services. She was moved out of that destructive environment she was in, but the girl ran away and returned to live with her friend, or perhaps not quite a friend, Mr. Paul Clark. Evidence suggests that Rozi, the first victim, informed social services of Lorraine's location at that time. And supposedly, in the end, this also became a reason for Rozi to be killed, besides the story with the puppy. The trial itself lasted for more than a week. There were a lot of questions, but in the end, all the evidence together with the forensic experts' conclusions about the causes of death of Ms. Rozi and Desmond left no options, and the jury found both of them guilty. Paul Clark received a life sentence, and Lorraine Thorp also got life with a minimum term of 14 years. This means that after spending 14 years behind bars, she can apply for parole. During the sentencing, the judge said the following to Lorraine. She is responsible for the prolonged kicking and punching inflicted on Ms. Rosalind, who was unable to effectively defend herself from the very beginning. By the end of these attacks, she was completely helpless. Lorraine does not regret what she did. In fact, she seems proud of it, describing to her friends in one breath how she hit Rosalind on the head. The only possible explanation for Desmond Thorpe's death could be the fear that he would go and tell the police about what happened. I do not accept that Lorraine was under Mr. Clark's control. She is a person who can be quite stubborn and has a really strong will. She herself is undoubtedly capable of being extremely manipulative. On September 1, 2014, Paul Clark hanged himself in his cell. As for Lorraine Thorpe, in the summer of 2023, she finally gained the right to apply for parole. Well, she did apply, but she was denied. So to this day, Lorraine Thorpe continues to serve her life sentence behind bars. That's how it is, my friends. I don't know what to say, but I'll say something. Love your children. Give them enough attention, at least as much as you can. And take care of yourselves, of course. Stay healthy and happy, and I'll see you in the next video.